Today is an historic event for women in science and technology. It is the launching of Women in Science and Technology Month. It is Witty's first Hall of Fame. I kept walking up and down that aisle and getting chills from the top of my head to my toes, seeing the photographs of the women who are going to be inducted today into Witty's first Hall of Fame, and hope it will be something that each of you aspires to in the future. The idea of Witty's Hall of Fame came about in a discussion with Witty Advisory Board, with Witty members, to determine what else we could do to bring attention to the magnificent accomplishments of women in science and technology.
Just to ask questions, but to give us answers. We could all use some. I think this is the one of only 2 times that you will all be together in the same room. So I hope you will feel free to use this as an occasion to talk to each other, to make any organizing announcements of upcoming troublemaking meetings or tactics. Come up and use the mic if you like. Stand up and say where the bodies are buried in your company or industry, or if you'd rather not say it out loud, you can give me a note. I'm leaving early in the morning and I'm self-employed, so there's nothing that I won't read. And generally to turn this into an organizing meeting, because we are all here in this room in a kind of chemical combination that could never have happened before in history and may never happen again. So I hope very much that we make use of it. I know that we each come here from a different world, but we do arrive at a particular time in history, which is the 3rd decade of the 2nd wave of the feminist movement.
I wanted to create an environment that represented an association that I would want to go to. So I wanted it to have a strong business focus because I felt that even if you're a pure technologist, if you don't understand the business of your company, your contribution will be very limited. I wanted to help women understand that. I also wanted to create an environment where no matter what your title was, you were treated with equal respect, so that whether you were a secretary or a vice president, when you walked into that meeting, there wasn't this cliquey, I'm better than you are because of what my title is. So that's why I established a policy that is when anyone goes to a witty event and you see someone standing alone, it is your response, your opportunity to bring them into your group and introduce them to everybody. Ended up starting my first business in my home. And as I told Nora, feel that the greatest gift technology has given to society is that technology allows us, families, to work in our homes and take care of children. But I really believe also that workplaces need to really incorporate the human element, because each one of you who works for a company, each one of us, comes to work with a lot of personal stuff that we have to manage. And we have to find a way to make sure that work environments really support healthy home environments. And it's not going to happen if we don't understand issues that people have and try to make it so supportive that people go back feeling rejuvenated and want to give positive energy back. Today is an historic event for women in science and technology. It is the launching of Women in Science and Technology Month. It is Witty's first Hall of Fame. I kept walking up and down that aisle and getting chills from the top of my head to my toes, seeing the photographs of the women who are going to be inducted today into Witty's first Hall of Fame, and hope it will be something that each of you aspires to in the future. The idea of Witty's Hall of Fame came about in a discussion with Witty Advisory Board, with Witty members, to determine what else we could do to bring attention to the magnificent accomplishments of women in science and technology.
just to ask questions, but to give us answers. We could all use some. I think this is the one of only 2 times that you will all be together in the same room. So I hope you will feel free to use this as an occasion to talk to each other, to make any organizing announcements of upcoming troublemaking meetings or tactics. Come up and use the mic if you like. Stand up and say where the bodies are buried in your company or industry. Or if you'd rather not say it out loud, you can give me a note. I'm leaving early in the morning and I'm self-employed, so there's nothing that I won't read. And generally to turn this into an organizing meeting, because we are all here in this room in a kind of chemical combination that could never have happened before in history and may never happen again. So I hope very much that we make use of it. I know that we each come here from a different world, but we do arrive at a particular time in history, which is the 3rd decade of the 2nd wave of the feminist movement.
I want to assure you that you are in the right room for the Witty Summit, Day 2. So we'll be right with you to begin the program in just a couple of minutes.
I wanted to create an environment that represented an association that I would want to go to. So I wanted it to have a strong business focus, because I felt that even if you're a pure technologist, if you don't understand the business of your company, your contribution will be very limited. I wanted to help women understand that. I also wanted to create an environment where no matter what your title was, you were treated with equal respect, so that whether you were secretary or vice president, when you walked into that meeting, there wasn't this cliquey, I'm better than you are because of what my title is. So that's why I established a policy that is when anyone goes to a Witty event and you see someone standing alone, it is your response, your opportunity to bring them into your group and introduce them to everybody. Ended up starting my first business in my home. And as I told Nora, I feel that the greatest gift technology has given to society is that technology allows us, families, to work in our homes and take care of children. But I really believe also that workplaces need to really incorporate the human element, because each one of you who works for a company, each one of us, comes to work with a lot of personal stuff that we have to manage. And we have to find a way to make sure that work environments really support healthy home environments. And it's not going to happen if we don't understand issues that people have and try to make it so supportive that people go back feeling rejuvenated and want to give positive energy back.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back. It is wonderful to have you all in our midst virtually once again for the second day of Witty's first virtual summit. And to kick things off and to do a little recap of yesterday, let's please welcome back Kim Menninger.
Thank you so much, Rick, and thank you all for being here again this morning. I hope you all had a wonderful day yesterday. Yesterday was such an amazing day. All of the sessions were wonderful. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we're really excited for the second day. So here's what we're going to do today. We are going to start with a keynote presentation that's going to be brought to us by Huawei. It's called Sharing Our Brand Story in the Face of Geopolitical Bias with Joy Tan and with Hope King. And we are also really excited about the exhibit hall and the career fair that will be happening at 9 a.m. So we've had an amazing career fair going on for the last day. But in addition to that, the exhibit hall is also hosting companies like Huawei, Okta, Walden University that are showcasing their products and services. So stop by their booths and enter to win some prizes. Again, the exhibit hall will be open today at 9 a.m. We hope you'll continue to take advantage of some of the other opportunities to learn, to connect. We'll have the networking cafe again, where you'll have an opportunity to take a coffee break. There'll be open discussions. We have more coaching circles. The coaching circles were very popular and filled up very quickly. So what we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to be adding a structured networking session for anybody who's interested and wasn't able to join a coaching circle. I will be leading that. So check out the schedule for more information on that. We also have some panels and workshops coming up, including farms to incubators, stories of women innovators in ag tech, We've got other workshops and panels like drones, a disruptive technology, innovation lab, developing an innovation leader capability, how to lead better ideation and problem solving, how to use TikTok for business, a great array of different topics and many more. So as always, check out the schedule for more details. And of course, come back to visit the Wellbeing Centers. Today's session is going to be on mindfulness, so be sure to check that out. We have the bookstore, the Art and Technology Center, and then again, as I mentioned, the Career Fair and the Product Expo will be going on until I think 1 o'clock today, so feel free to hop in there and check that out at any time. Everything, again, is always on the schedule. Feel free to check that out, take advantage of everything. If you have any questions, reach out, let us know what we can do to help you. And hopefully some of your children had a chance to engage with Brain Candy Labs yesterday. We've got more programming from them today with Lauren Sachs, I Want to Be Me When I Grow Up, and Jade Tan Holmes, How to Make Your Own Science video. So check those out as well. And last but not least, make sure that you stick around to the end of the day where we will have some more speed networking. You don't want to miss that. As I mentioned before, one of the really powerful elements of the Witty Summit is the opportunity to connect more meaningfully with other participants. So make sure that you're taking advantage of all of the great networking opportunities that are available, including speed networking, which is what we'll do to wrap up the day. So thank you, everybody. Looking forward to connecting with many of you throughout the day. All right. So we will be getting started in a moment. We have our next session, which will be starting at 8:15. I don't know if we want to, hold on here, I'm just checking the schedule here to make sure. We've got our, as I mentioned, we've got Joy Tan and Hope King coming up. And in a moment, I will introduce Hope and we will kick that up. We kick that out. We have just a quick break here before we kick that off in about 10 minutes. Okay, so it looks like we're going to get started. Let's get started now. I'm going to introduce Hope. So it's my pleasure to introduce Hope King. She's a familiar face and name to anybody who follows business news. Hope covers everything from the financial markets and economy to Silicon Valley, Hollywood, China, and the White House. She has interviewed Alibaba founder Jack Ma, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, NBA superstar Stephen Curry, and Crazy Rich Asians author Kevin Kwan. Hope was most recently the top news anchor at Cheddar, reporting live from the New York Stock Exchange every day for nearly 4 years. Prior to that, Hope was a tech reporter at CNN. So please welcome me now, or join me now in welcoming Hope. Welcome, Hope.
Hi, good morning, Kim. Thank you so much for that really nice introduction. As you mentioned, I'm a business news anchor, and I'm really excited to continue to cover this through this witty format as well. And Joy Tan, who we're going to be talking to next, her chat is called "The New Reality: Technology and Global Politics Are Permanently Intertwined." And boy, are they ever. I mean, if you look at any of these news stories today, whether it's here in the US with big tech regulation or anything else, this is really a big key factor here in how companies are going to have to manage their products going forward. And of course, relations, government relations. And as most of you know, Huawei is one of the biggest manufacturers of telecommunications equipment and consumer electronics in the world. In April, Huawei actually surpassed Samsung and Apple to be the #1 smartphone maker in the world in April, according to Counterpoint Research. And for those who do not know, Huawei is headquartered in Shenzhen, China. They have over 190,000 employees around the world, and they're doing business in over 170 countries. So as SVP Public Affairs of Huawei Technologies USA, Joy is responsible for setting and executing public relations and government relations strategies for Huawei US. Now, prior to her role exclusively focused on the influential and political market here in the US, Joy was actually president of global media and communications at Huawei, setting the strategy for the entire company when it comes to media and communications. Now, prior to joining Huawei, Joy was responsible for consumer strategy and digital marketing at Verizon. She also had a hand in customer acquisition for TXU Energy, which is an electricity provider in Texas. And Joy, as I learned very early on in meeting her for the first time, she's got a deep background in a lot of other sciences, neuroscience and biology as well. She also has an MBA from the University of Texas at Dallas. So she's a woman who knows a lot about technology and science, and of course now with communications and media in this very complicated landscape. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Joy today. She's going to give a presentation, but right after we will chat. So everyone, please welcome in your own way from the safety of your own homes, Joy Tan.
Thank you, Hope. It's a great honor to be here. I hope everyone is staying safe and doing well. I want to thank Witty for inviting me to speak on a very important topic. This is a really challenging time for all of us, especially people in the technology field. However, I think this is also a very interesting time with a lot of opportunities if we can find ways to work together. For centuries, technology has always been a key driver in propelling our societies forward. During the last 40 years, we have seen some amazing technologies fundamentally transforming the way we live and work. For example, the internet, mobile phones, online search, and social networks. As we enter the fourth industrial revolution, 5G has become the cornerstone of all the changes we're experiencing today and well into the future. We believe 5G is transforming every aspect of our world. For consumers, 5G will bring a peak speed that is 100 times faster than 4G. For example, in Switzerland, Huawei's network is providing speed up to 1.5 gigabit per second. So you'll be able to live stream in high definition format, whatever you see on the mountain slopes when you ski. In Korea, you'll be able to use a 5G smartphone to watch a live game from any angle you want, 360 degrees. And then you can also make the smartphone follow your favorite player throughout the entire game. So this is truly a personalized experience. AR and VR will be prevalent, providing immersive experience for consumers while reducing the cost per bit. In the home, connecting the unconnected and providing faster speed will be the key objectives for 5G commercialization. Worldwide, 950 million homes still do not have high-speed connectivity. 80% of those connected still need faster speed. This pandemic has really shown how important it is to have high-speed connectivity to every home. 5G can solve that problem quickly. As for the B2B market, industries are actively embracing 5G because 5G can help them improve efficiency while reducing the cost. I want to use the media industry as an example. I'm sure all of you have seen the trucks or buses from TV stations. They cost millions of dollars and days to set up. 8 months ago, Huawei was able to condense the technology in the truck into a backpack, so one person can carry it and do the job. 3 months ago, the backpack was further reduced to a pocket-sized device. Today, the truckload of technology has been fully integrated into the chipset for 5G video camera. With all the impact 5G is having on consumers, businesses, and industries, research estimates the 5G value chain is expected to bring $13.2 trillion in global economic value by 2035, generating 22.3 million jobs. So there's a lot at stake. That is why governments around the world are paying so much attention to the 5G deployment. AI is another key technology that is changing every industry. From the traditional industries like agriculture and mining on the bottom left side of this curve, to banking, media, communication, and OTT on the upper right-hand side of the curve, every industry is embracing AI. Healthcare industry traditionally has been slow to embrace new technologies, but this pandemic sped up the AI adoption by hospitals and healthcare professionals. I can give you some examples on how AI is being used right now to help fight COVID-19. One of the key symptoms of severe COVID-19 patient is the change of their lung structure, which can only be detected by a CT scan. On average, it takes about 12 minutes for specialists to read the scan and make the diagnosis. So Huawei developed a combination approach. The AI-assisted diagnosis only takes 10 seconds, and the result can be quickly confirmed by a specialist within 2 minutes. So we're improving the speed by 6 times. This solution has been used by over 100 hospitals around the world. Another example is the AI temperature monitoring system that is used by airports or train stations. It can detect 10 people per second, improving the efficiency by 50 times. Technology, particularly social media, has made massive impact on politics over the last 10 to 15 years. Social media initially were used to help people connect with their friends and families. And companies use social media to promote products and solutions to targeted audience. Over time, politicians began using social media to reach and target voters and directly communicate with them rather than rely on news media to deliver messages. Recently, we have seen some downsides of social media. It has been used as a vehicle to amplify misinformation and fake news. Today, social media and online news have reduced the amount of time people spend reading or listening, making flashy soundbites more impactful than policy in some cases. As technology is being deeply embedded in everything we do, governments are getting more and more involved in regulating it. Politicians are making decisions on important technology issues that were previously decided by the open market. So today, government and tech companies have very complicated relationships. What I've seen in some cases where governments support tech companies. The tech industry is extremely important because it drives job and economic growth and the long-term competitiveness of a country. The US government has been supporting autonomous driving, solar, and AI tech companies. And the UK and German governments have been investing heavily into AI sector. And the Chinese government is investing in chip manufacturing. However, we have seen some other cases where governments and tech companies have a lot of conflicts. Social media has been a contentious topic during the last several years, especially politicians have learned how much data these companies have and what their data policies are. And more recently, I have seen an executive order targeting social media companies. Uber had a lot of battles with state governments. Amazon and Google had conflicts with not just the US government, but governments in Europe and other regions. Huawei, as a leader in 5G and mobile phones, and a company based in China, is definitely facing unprecedented challenges. The US government has an ongoing campaign to attack Huawei through CFO arrest, legal charges, executive order, and placement on the entity list. And additionally, there's this immense pressure the US government puts on their allies to stop working with Huawei. More recently, Huawei has also become a casualty because of the anti-China bias due to COVID-19. I think many of you have heard about Huawei. Because we sell smartphones in many countries, we enjoy pretty good brand awareness, 93% worldwide. However, I would imagine you have heard things not so positive about the company. Huawei is one of the most, if not the most, misunderstood companies in the world. Today, I would like to share with you what the past 18 months has been like for me and our communications team to navigate through this challenge. But first, I think it's important for you to have some background on who Huawei is. Huawei is a global provider of information and communications technology for infrastructure and smart devices. The company was founded in 1987 by a 42-year-old starving entrepreneur, Mr. Ren Zhenfei, together with several partners. They had $3,500 as the founding capital. Today, Huawei has 194,000 employees worldwide. Almost half of the entire workforce, 96,000 people, are dedicated to R&D. Huawei is a private company that is 100% owned by employees. Over the years, Mr. Ren diluted almost all his shares and gave them to employees. He has about 1% share of the company. Huawei's journey to success was certainly not easy. At the beginning, they were only able to sell in very rural Chinese towns and villages because the cities were dominated by Western vendors. Around year 2000, Huawei was forced to go to overseas because the Chinese market was too competitive and hard to survive. And the first overseas contract was less than $100. But with employees' hard work and perseverance, in 2019, the company reached $123 billion in global revenue. And today, the company operates in 170 countries and was ranked number 61 on the Fortune 500 list. Since the very beginning of the company, Huawei has been investing at least 10% of its annual revenue into research and development. For the last 10 years, Huawei invested over almost $90 billion in R&D. And Huawei is ranked number 5 in terms of total R&D investment globally, after Alphabet, Samsung, Volkswagen, and Microsoft. Over the years, Huawei has accumulated over 85,000 patents, and 90% of those are invention patents. And today, Huawei holds the most 5G patents in the world. As a private company, Huawei doesn't have to worry about the quarterly earnings as much as public companies. So we were able to invest money into long-term research on fundamental science and technology. For example, mathematics, physics, chemistry, material science, and cooling technology. Huawei has over 80 labs focusing on basic technologies, over 700 PhDs in mathematics, over 200 PhDs in physics and chemistry, and over 5,000 PhDs in engineering. We started designing the first chip in 1991. After 30 years, Huawei's Kirin 990 is the world's most advanced chip for 5G smartphones. In addition to the leadership in 5G infrastructure, consumer business is a very important area for Huawei as well. In a rather short time period, Huawei entered the consumer electronic markets, launching smartphones, tablets, wearable devices, and laptops. And this business has been doing really well and continues to grow at a very fast rate. In 2019, Huawei sold over 240 million smartphones and had 17.6% share of the market, and just behind Samsung. And this April, actually, we exceeded Samsung in terms of market share, at least just for that month. Huawei is not just focused on growth, but also on innovation and a vision for the future. We played a significant role in advancing smartphone photography through a strategic partnership with Leica, making the rather exclusive professional grade photography available to hundreds of millions consumers. And we're also one of the first companies to launch the foldable smartphone. In 2019, Huawei introduced another operating system, Harmony OS, which will give developers more opportunities for collaboration and consumers more choices. The pressure from the US government has forced Huawei to quickly reevaluate and change its PR communication approach, which required a huge culture shift. Traditionally, Huawei has been relatively conservative in terms of who we communicated with, what we communicated, and how often we communicated. Our founder, Mr. Ren, rarely spoke with media because it was not something he thought was very necessary. But we had to be very vigilant, proactive, and open after the challenges. So we implement some new initiatives globally, from bringing media to headquarters for visit to hosting monthly media salon with our executives in different countries. Our founder did almost 40 interviews with media from around the world, which is much more than the total interview he did during the previous 30 years. And we also adopt a more proactive crisis communication strategy to anticipate negative stories and try to get ahead of those. The culture shift is not a simple straight line. There's a lot of work that goes into it. It's demanding and sometimes frustrating, but it was a very important and essential process for the company to go through. And we still have a long way to go. Our proactive communication strategy requires balance. We have to tell the right story to help people understand who Huawei really is. And we approach media, influencers, and content through the lenses of 5 important types of stories. First, we focus on getting out facts and truths about the company to combat misinformation. And we highlighted the importance of technology and innovation, which is the foundation of our digital world. We shared what we're doing through the Tech for All initiatives to demonstrate Huawei's positive social impact. And we highlighted the importance of connectivity no matter where people live. And lastly, we talked about cybersecurity and explaining what the governments and industry must do to increase security. So I will elaborate in the next several slides. First of all, we felt it was absolutely essential to get out the facts and truths about the company. We had to correct the vast amount of misinformation about Huawei. Sometimes even straightforward facts like the Huawei is 100% owned by its employees was not being reported accurately. So we launched the Huawei Facts website to convey Huawei's information to media and stakeholders. And we continue to promote this website through social media channels. We want to emphasize the importance of connectivity. There's a huge digital divide globally and in the US. To bring attention to this matter, we launched the Connect Not Divide campaign, which focuses on how we're stronger when we work together to bring connectivity to teachers, farmers, hospitals, emergency services, families, and businesses. We want to frame the conversation around contentious topics like 5G and connectivity more positively. The content we created for this campaign has been shared across social media, traditional media, influencers, events, advertisements, and more. When it comes to social impact, Tech for All is a global initiative for Huawei, which aligns with UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We do not simply pursue technological advances. We focus more on the social value created by technology. That's why we want to make long-term nonprofit investment to make sure the sustainability of digital inclusion, leaving no one behind. Tech for All's objective is to help another 500 million people benefit from digital technology in the next 5 years. We work with global organizations like UN agencies, NGOs, research institutes, governments, and businesses. We focus on 4 high-impact domains: supporting equal access to high-quality education, protecting the fragile environment, promoting health and well-being, and driving balanced development. For example, Track AI is an AI system that can identify visual disorder in infants so that they can receive treatment earlier on in their lives to avoid permanent damage. StorySign is another app we developed that uses AI and AR to translate storybooks into sign languages to help deaf children overcome their reading barriers. These amazing stories have been shared by consumers naturally in many different countries. So they generated huge social media buzz and won many different awards. Just like many other companies, Huawei gives back to local communities. We have partnered with charities, schools, local governments across the regions and countries to bridge the digital divide and utilize technology for the greater good. While we have been doing this kind of work for many years, we have not done a good job talking about it. We had to be very thoughtful and creative in telling these stories. And of course, our talented and diverse workforce can make it happen. A lot of our employees self-directed and produce videos to talk about the impact of their work on their kids, their families, and their communities. And these stories are not about Huawei. They're not about technology. They're just innately human, which are the best kind of stories. When it comes to reaching our core audiences, there's no single channel or platform that can connect to everyone. So we have to think really hard. Media obviously will have large reach, but we have to think beyond the core set of outlets we usually talk to. We also identified more influencers that we could engage with. Content was a big focus. As we developed written and visual content that was also used for social media, advertisement, and more. We started attending and speaking at more events and amplifying the content from these events on social media platforms. And when COVID-19 hit, we launched a series of webinars to continue to reach our audience, even we could not meet in person. The culture shift I mentioned earlier had made a huge impact on our communication efforts during the last 18 months. We had a lot of more open communication with journalists, experts, researchers, and government delegations. We shared significantly more information than we had in the past, especially on Huawei's governance structure and shareholders. We hosted a lot of government delegations, customers, and media at our Brussels Cybersecurity Transparency Center. Our efforts were not just focused on external communications, but also every aspect of the company, including employees. At the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned Huawei was profoundly misunderstood. So our objective was to balance that conversation and convey Huawei's side of the story. This work never ends, but we're seeing some progress already. From these headlines, you can see we're changing the conversation a little bit. Of course, not every article is like this, but we're seeing more and more balance over time. So I want to summarize with 5 of the key lessons we have learned during this process. First, understand what you can and cannot control, and focus on the things you can control to make progress. And second, business continuity is extremely critical. Huawei has gained a lot of experience over the years when we have to deal with natural disasters in different parts of the world. And this kind of learning has become valuable when we have to deal with challenges from the governments. And third, the communications team always have to be prepared for everything, especially when you have to work across different time zones to make a fast response. And fourth, surround yourself with a diverse group of people with different experiences and different cultural understandings, because that's the only way you can see and understand the entire picture. And last but not least, there's really no silver bullet that can fix everything. It's going to take hard work and time to navigate through the challenges, but there's really no substitute to rolling up your sleeves and getting things done. So I hope these lessons can be helpful while we continue to work in this environment where government and technology are increasingly intertwined. Thank you.
Joy, thank you so much for walking us through the complexities of not only what you do, your team, but of course of the company overall. I think, the theme is that the biggest challenge for the company has been trying to clear up some of the misunderstandings of how it's run, what it does. You're seeing questions right now in the chat as well, still asking what is the relationship between the Chinese government and the company. But I want to also focus on you, as a lot of us are coming into this session today wondering what it's like to be in your shoes. I mean, right now, you are a woman in tech. You're leading a company through this geopolitical crisis, communications-wise, government relations. You're also going through this during the pandemic. People are working remotely on your teams, the whole company maybe in certain parts. And then you also have what you also had mentioned is this racist, feeling that has re-entered not only here in the US, but around the world against people of Chinese backgrounds and maybe even Chinese companies. So of all of those layers that you're going through right now, which of them poses the biggest challenge for you in your day-to-day and what you have to do?
Well, Hope, everything you mentioned is a huge challenge. But I think the hardest part of my work right now is to transform our communication efforts into the realities of today. As every team member in the US is working from home in different cities, and our stakeholders, media, analysts, influencers, and other stakeholders are working from home as well. So this is a very big challenge. In 2019, we did a lot of activities in person. So we brought over 100 journalists and influencers to China so that they can see what Huawei is like and understand more about the company. We attended a lot of events, and we hosted a lot of events as well in the US. But for the last 3 months, we couldn't do any of these. So we have to really figure out what we could do, what works, what doesn't work, and what success means in this environment. So it's really a constant learning process.
Right. And I think, given that your role has two parts, really, right? Government and media, how much of a change, and you went through it in your presentation, the perception in media, how much of it maybe has changed from your perspective on the government side as well, relations wise? Is there still a lot of trust, distrust between, Chinese companies, American companies as well? And then maybe even from a global perspective, how does the US and the perceptions here internally here compare to how Huawei is viewed in other countries?
Mm-hmm. Well, certainly at this moment, the relationship between the US and Chinese government is very complicated and it's very tense. Huawei and some other companies got dragged into this geopolitical conflict, which we have no control over, and we do not want to be a part of that. From the business perspective, we have long-lasting relationships with US companies like Microsoft, IBM, Intel. We have been working with these companies for many years. The same goes for European companies and companies in South America and other regions. We continue to work well and contribute to the growth of the global supply chain.
Okay. So, of course, there's a lot of the changes that you mentioned, and you do have a team. So when you look at the team that you have today, and even if a lot of people are remote now, how do you try to work with them globally to have more of an alignment when the geopolitical environment changes so rapidly?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been with Huawei for 13 years in various marketing and communication positions. I've witnessed the tremendous growth of Huawei globally. And so I'm very fortunate to be a part of this process, actually. When I was the head of global communications, I set up a very extensive and comprehensive communication framework and processes. For example, crisis communication, executive communication, content development, and social media. So these processes are quite mature and running smoothly. During the last 18 months, we just had to pretty much increase the workload in every aspect. And we hired a lot of PR professionals in pretty much all the key countries, including US, Canada, Germany, the UK, France, and many other key countries. And with a large organization across so many different regions and time zones, we just have to collaborate as much as possible. On a regular basis, we have meetings to discuss strategy and plan and share best practices and content ideas. We coordinate on global and local events. We have formal meetings, usually on a weekly basis, sometimes 2-week basis. And we have also a lot of informal chat groups on different projects and topics. And for example, for most of the global media, they have their offices in the US, New York, San Francisco, in the UK, and APAC. And for Huawei employees, we have our PR manager in these regions as well to work with global media outlets. And on a regular basis, we'll discuss what is going on with particular media title in that region. So really, you can, when you have so many teams in different places, you have to align as much as possible. You can never over communicate.
Yeah, and I think people, also should appreciate the fact that being headquartered in, China and having a global team means that you've got calls probably throughout the entire day, that teams are hopping on all types of, and during all types of hours and during the night to get onto the same page. So I think that's one of the complexities too of trying to get everybody on the same page. Now, before the pandemic hit, there was a lot of talk about this Cold War from a tech perspective, a tech Cold War. Is that still a concern now? Has that been pushed back on, whether it's the media's minds, the government's minds, because everybody's focused on solving the health crisis? Or is that something they're still concerned about and something that is still trying to be sort of worked out internally with Huawei and other industries as a whole?
Mhm. Well, I think many people, myself included, are very concerned about the tech Cold War. And, some people think the decoupling is already happening. I think the impact is quite far reaching. First of all, I think it will be significant impact on business and jobs in the short term and in the long term. Huawei's business, of course, has been impacted since last May when we were put on the entity list. With basically, Huawei could not buy products and components from the US. In general, Huawei procures about $11 to $12 billion in the US from different companies. So that equates to about 50,000 indirect jobs in the US. And last month, the situation worsened when the government announced that chip manufacturers like Taiwan Semiconductor had to apply for license if they want to sell to Huawei. So based on the report from Boston consulting firm, if this situation continues, we could potentially see 16% drop in revenue for US semiconductor industry. If US completely bans companies selling to Chinese companies, the drop in revenue could be up to 37%. So that's about 40,000 direct, highly skilled jobs in the semiconductor industry in the US. So that's a huge impact. And I think this is not just about US and Chinese companies. Some European companies are starting to look at the impact on their business because the situation, they want to rely less on US components and technology. So this will probably impact many industries in the US and have long-term effect. And secondly, I think there will be slower and more expensive innovation because back during the evolution from 2G to 3G, there are different standards in the US and in Europe. So they have to have different equipment and different devices. So eventually consumers will have to pay more for less innovation. And for the first time, 5G is a global unified standard, and we certainly do not want to go backwards. And lastly, I think there will be a huge impact on cybersecurity as well. Right now, all the equipment manufacturers rely on a global supply chain. So excluding one or two vendors based on their national origin will not solve the cybersecurity issue. On the contrary, it will make the cyber world more vulnerable because the remaining vendors will have less incentive to embrace industry best practice and create more exposures for single points of failure. So I think these impacts are huge, and we definitely want to see the industries and governments work together to solve these issues.
Absolutely. I do want to address, there are a lot of some of these questions coming in. We're not really today going to be addressing these public questions, but I do want to acknowledge that I am seeing them. And a lot of these questions go back to your role specifically, which is to communicate what's happening inside of Huawei, how Huawei sells or does not sell products here in the US, the questions of the government, allegations and other things, which just goes back to what you had talked about in your presentation and what I had said at the beginning, which is that your job right now has to be one of the most challenging ones, given, who you are, what company you're working for right now, the political environment we're in, the COVID pandemic as well. So, there are a lot of these stories out there. So I would encourage everyone to just read. The journal, lots of great places have these stories updated where you can find that. But I do want to focus the conversation back on, your role specifically and what you're doing in a leadership position in technology. COVID, we haven't talked about this yet so far, you and I. You've talked about how right now you've got remote teams, you're trying to get them all on the same page, but it's also, of course, brought to mind for a lot of people how connectivity is so important if they need information to the latest health information from local governments. So from your perspective, how has this pandemic also changed the perception of technology right now that you are working on Huawei and as an industry moving toward 5G, when it does require so many people going out and building some of these structures and implementing them in many, many places?
After the pandemic hit, we saw mobile traffic increase 30% in China. Fixed data network traffic increased 70% in Italy. And overall data traffic increased 50% in Germany. So globally, there's a huge increase in data traffic. And millions and millions of people are working from home. So the peak hours have extended from just several hours to almost 15 hours a day. People need high-speed connectivity constantly, 24/7, essentially. So many countries have actually put in urgent requests or measurement to improve their infrastructure. For example, South Korea has increased their investment in 5G for the first half of 2020 by 50%. Belgium made fiber investment at least 40% of their total investment in the next 5 years. And Ireland issued their 5G spectrum within 3 days. So all the countries are taking all kinds of measurement to increase the connectivity speed. And as I mentioned earlier, 5G will be prevalent in everywhere, and AR and VR will be available. So from a communications perspective, marketing and communication professionals will have a lot of options and choices. In the past, we create just very engaging videos and creative designs and things like that. But now they can engage their audience much more interactively. And like the cases I mentioned earlier, there are new ways to interact with their audience. And virtual events like this one we're having right now will be very popular. And there are a lot of ways you can use AR and VR to be integrated into these virtual events. So the options are much more open for marketing and communication professionals.
Right. And the, challenges of the questions that have never come up before for a marketing or communications professional to deal with. So I'm sure those challenges are well earned and well learned throughout this process. I mean, one of the reasons why I love covering Huawei as a journalist is because of the global reach that Huawei has, not only from the enterprise perspective with communications equipment, but also on the smartphone side, as we talked about at the beginning, just for those who joined a little bit later. I mean, Huawei globally is now the #1 smartphone maker by market share, according to Counterpoint in April. And you are, from a market share perspective, one of the biggest, if not the biggest by market share and revenue, market share in terms of equipment of telecommunications. So the impact that you see globally is pretty vast, and you have a very unique perspective on that. And I just, from those who are looking at your role and saying, that's something that I want to do in my career, what did you learn from your professional life? Maybe some of the memorable lessons along the way that maybe you could share with folks. And also maybe if there was anybody that you looked up to. I mean, one of the reasons why I loved this format and the summit today is because a lot of times you just don't see people in your position when you're younger, in previous generations, and having these forums and having the visibility of someone like yourself at this level provides some inspiration. So maybe share with us who you looked up to when you were little and some of the lessons that helped you to get to where you are today.
Sure. I think when I was a little kid, I learned about this famous female Nobel Prize winner, Marie Curie. So she has overcome so many challenges, and she worked so hard to get where she was. And it was a very dangerous occupation for her to do all these experiments. And when I got older, I think I've learned a lot of more amazing scientists and business leaders, and every one of them is extremely inspirational to me. Over my professional life, I think the biggest thing I learned is never underestimate the importance of cultural difference. I've lived in the US for many years, and I went back to work in China, and I spent a lot of time in Europe and other regions as well. I've learned, culture is just so important in everything you do. Sometimes a very small thing can make a big difference in getting people to work together effectively. And I think when you understand the culture difference, you can really go deeper and understand why they do things certain ways, why they say things certain ways, and you can understand the meaning behind the spoken words. I think that is really important. And I think I have been very fortunate to help bridge that gap between the Eastern and Western cultures.
Absolutely, especially given your experiences as well. I remember the first time I met you and you told me about your science background, and I was just sort of blown away that you do have such a deep knowledge in other fields. You talk a lot about the communications of East-West cultures and global cultures. There's a new culture right now publicly out there, which is that employees feel a lot more empowered to speak out when they don't like something that's happening inside their company or in their past life. You see this now changing a lot of things, especially in my industry and media right now. What's your perspective, especially as a communications expert, when you see so many employees speaking out publicly, especially women of color? What does that trigger inside of you? Is that something that you think is good for what's happening? You think it's something that should be managed better by other companies? Would love to hear you talk about this a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's so important for us to continue to encourage this conversation and empower women to speak up. I think the history has been slow to empower the vast number of women out there. And we can see from the gender report issued by World Economic Forum in 2020, it will take 99.5 years to achieve gender equality. So that really emphasizes urgency and significance of breaking down the barriers that is restricting women from achieving this equality. So I think it is just so important. One good opportunity, though, is really to have women access more STEM jobs. Currently, there are about 26% women in computer roles. This is not because women are not in the education for computer science. It's just because women are, even after college education, only about 38% of them will stay in the field versus 53% of men staying in the computer field. So we need to encourage women to continue to stay in the subject, continue to voice their opinions. And achieving gender equality requires all of us to work together. This is going to take time and efforts. And as I mentioned, just like earlier on, one of the lessons, there's really no single silver bullet that can fix everything. It just takes the whole society to work together.
That's right. And everybody at an individual level as well. Okay, before we end, look, there's a lot of stuff that we can use now in our lives to distract ourselves. TikTok has become a big phenomenon as a communications professional, as an individual. Is Huawei going to jump into TikTok? How do you view new social media platforms? Is this something that should be part of a technology communications platform strategy?
Well, TikTok is certainly a fun platform, and my kids watch it all the time. I follow some of the workout videos on TikTok too. I think TikTok is being used by our Chinese teams to amplify a lot of the messages, especially for our consumer business. It's a fast rising platform and has a lot of potential. I think for certain part of our business, it will be a very important platform. And in the US, we have not started using that yet.
Okay. It's just blowing up, and I think a lot of companies are looking at, all social media platforms in general. What's your approach to vetting some of the content that you may have to, add on to your team's workload as well to get the messages out?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think our priority is really to balance the conversation and convey Huawei's side of the story. And we want to use social media as a platform to respond in a fast manner to correct some of the misinformation and then to tell Huawei's positive impact on the society. So I think that's what we use social media platforms for. And we focus a lot on LinkedIn. We use Twitter and Facebook to a certain extent to achieve these objectives.
Amazing. Joy, thank you so much. We started a little bit early today, so we got some bonus time with you, which is always great. And I'm going to give back everybody 2 minutes of their day as well. But thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to Witty for having us as well. It's been a real pleasure and joy. Joy, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hope. Thank you, Witty.
Thank you both so much. That was awesome. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Joy and Huawei, for just your support and working with us. And we're going to do some amazing things together.
Thank you so much for having me.